I started playing Dynasty Fantasy Football in 2014, and to be honest with you, I've had the same strategy in almost every single startup draft since. You want to go through, trade down, pick up additional mid-round picks, get some extra future first, but you can't do that anymore. If you've noticed over the past, I would say about 3 years, I want to say it started in 2019, 2020, that strategy of trading back became widely accepted as what everybody's wanted to do. So if you get into a startup draft, or at least over the past few off seasons, you'll notice when the guy who's at pick 2 is on the clock, what is he doing? He's going to the league chat saying, hey, the 102 on the trade block. Same thing when the person with the 3rd pick is on the clock. They go, hey, 103 on the trade block. Let me know if anybody wants to trade up here. Where everybody's trying to trade back and you no longer can't. The price to trade back has dramatically increased. And honestly, I think for this reason and how tiers look this season, we have to zig while other people are zagging. This is the time, this is the offseason where I honestly think it will be a good idea to trade up in startup drafts. I'm going to talk about how we do it. I'm going to talk about what picks we are targeting and what picks we are going to be looking to trade away. But before we get into it, make sure you drop a like on this video, subscribe if you play Dynasty, and if you want to get in a draft with us, you know you can find the link to Underdog Fantasy. We just launched a $1 million draft contest in the description, in the comment section. When you sign up for Underdog with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100, and you'll get our 2023 Dynasty rankings. But I think that should be about it. So let's talk about where I am looking to trade up. And this is going to be very simple. It's not like I'm sitting here going, okay, yeah, I don't want any 8th round picks. I don't want any 9th round picks. Let's try to get up into the 5th. Because in reality, I don't think you're doing much there. I mean, what? We're going to be trading away an 8th round pick that's Calvin Ridley to get into the 5th round to take Jameson Williams. How much value are you actually adding on there from a raw points per game perspective over the next 3 years? The floor ceiling combo with those wide receivers probably going to be comparable. So I don't see a big gap between, say, round 5 and round 8. But you know where there is a massive gap? That is the quarterback position. You see this in those early underdog drafts that we're looking at. I mean, like I said, Underdog has the $1 million draft contest right now. And if you're looking at where quarterbacks are going in a single QB best ball format, they're going in the 2nd round. And the reason for this is those quarterbacks at the top of draft boards, we've talked about this for years, have a ceiling that has never before been seen in fantasy football. We talked about that 10 years ago or so. You used to have your quarterbacks that could run the ball for about 30 rushing yards per game. You used to have your guys like Tyrod Taylor. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you would have your Tom Brady, your Peyton Manning, your quarterbacks that could go out there and consistently average over 300 passing yards per game. But you really had to choose between one of those guys. Well, the players now at the top of draft boards can combine both of them. You are now looking at players like Josh Allen that can throw the ball for over 300 passing yards a game and at the same time go out there and have 40 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. This gives these quarterbacks access to a ceiling that we really haven't seen before in fantasy, and from a raw points per game perspective, put them significantly ahead of quarterbacks later on in the tier. If you're going to be looking at someone like Goff, Pickett, Kirk Cousins, Mac Jones, Geno Smith, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, none of them can come close to the ceiling that those quarterbacks at the top have. So if we're looking at the drop-off from a points per game perspective at the quarterback position, you'll see very soon that there are clear buckets of guys that dry up quickly. The first 6 picks, you have Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, in whatever order that you would like. Now, keep in mind with these quarterbacks, yes, a Josh Allen, a Patrick Mahomes will be much better than Trevor Lawrence, but I still want to say that we can confidently build a team around Trevor Lawrence. Whereas that second category of quarterback, you're going to be looking at players that have an incredibly high ceiling, but all have a red flag for one reason or another. You're looking at Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. And then if we're going to go over to that 3rd tier of quarterbacks, we're looking at some guys that all have question marks surrounding them. Maybe they can get up into tier 2. They're probably never going to be tier 1 guys. the Dak Prescott, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Tua Tagovailoa. But beyond that, then you have another massive drop off. And for this reason, if you pull a top 6 pick in your Dynasty startup draft this offseason, bravo, you're crushing it. You're going to be sitting pretty. But outside the top 6, this is the year that we trade up. This is the year that we do anything we can to get one of those quarterbacks inside the top 6 picks. Because if I'm sitting there in this most recent startup mock draft we did at the 110, and I'm not really knowing where we go, and I end up having to take Bijan Robinson and then Deshaun Watson in the second, just because I don't know what our quarterback options are going to be later on. Then we had to follow it up with Anthony Richardson in the 5th, Kenny Pickett in the 6th, just kind of throwing our hands in the air saying we don't know what to do. I think I would be much more comfortable taking that first round pick that we have at the 110, which ended up being Bijan Robinson, combine it with a pick that we have later on in the draft just to move up inside the top 6. This is something that I would have never done 5 years ago. But if I could say trade our first round pick and then also our 7th round pick, or if we really had to, the 6th round pick to say get to the Joe Burrow range, that makes so much sense. Like, let me trade the 110 and honestly the 510. Let me trade my 1st and 5th to go up to the 103, the 104, and to be able to come away with a Joe Burrow. And if we can start out Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, in my mind, that is a smash. We get an incredibly high floor and ceiling combo for the foreseeable future. And if we're going to be looking at other trade packages we could potentially make work, if you don't want to trade your first round pick, I would say at that point, say you're picking in the middle of the 2nd round, you no longer have access to the Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson tier, and you really don't want to take a Dak Prescott, then at that point, say you're sitting there with the 206, I honestly wouldn't even mind trading like the 206 and then the 406, which in this draft example would be A.J. Brown and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and going out of our way and getting a Joe Burrow caliber player. Because while it sounds like we're paying a lot on the surface, and while definitely I wouldn't have recommended trading your 2nd and 4th round startup picks just to move up in the 1st round 2 years ago, based on this draft board, in my mind, I think you would come away with the dominant team. Because at that point, you'd be coming away with a core of Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, Travis Etienne, and I can work beyond that. I can backfill wide receiver, running back depth, whereas this team that is unable to select one of those elite level quarterbacks because they're boxed out at 7, instead, they have to go Justin Jefferson in round 1, and then they're not able to get their first quarterback until Kirk Cousins in round 7. I don't even know who their second quarterback ended up being in this draft. So good luck going up against the team that was able to pair together Patrick Mahomes with Tyreek Hill and Saquon Barkley. There's just no way you're going to be competitive when we know that those quarterbacks in tier 1 are going to be able to outscore Kirk Cousins by 8 fantasy points per game. Like, good luck. You're not going to be able to overcome it. And honestly, if we were sitting here inside the top 6 picks already, say we got lucky enough to pull the 101, we got lucky enough to get Patrick Mahomes, I wouldn't mind still going out of our way, trying to trade for an additional pick inside the top 6 and coming away with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert to build around our team for a very long time. Like, at that point, if we could go through and trade, say, our 2nd and 4th round pick to get the 106, I'm doing it. You can't have too many of those elite level quarterbacks. You can backfill running back, you can backfill wide receiver, but those quarterbacks simply are not available later on in the draft, and you cannot really find those guys in rookie drafts either. Like, we're very rarely going to see someone like Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence coming out of these draft classes. Now, if we are looking at where the second teardrop is in terms of me willing to just throw in mid-round picks just to get the deal done, I would say the 4th round is probably about the last round where I'm looking at cornerstone assets. Here in the 4th round, you have JSN, you have DK Metcalf. I mean, you even have someone like Will Levis going off the board. But once you get to about the middle of the 5th, I feel like that's when there's actually that significant teardrop in terms of the wide receivers and running backs on the board. The beginning of the 5th, you still possibly have a Deebo Samuel, Austin Eckler, Christian Watson, Jordan Addison, if you like them. But by the time we get to the end of the 5th round, There, I ended up just having to take Anthony Richardson, Kenny Pickett, because I didn't know what to do. Probably should have taken Daniel Jones looking back on it. But regardless, you're looking at wide receivers like Michael Pittman, Jerry Jeudy, Treylon Burks, who in my opinion are probably not nearly as interesting as those guys that you would have at the beginning of the 5th round or the end of the 4th round. So I'd say while we're trying to trade up to get inside the top 6 picks of your startup draft, be willing to easily go through and add in an additional pick if it's after the middle of the 5th. Or honestly, just to say it safely, if it's a 6th round pick or later. Because in my mind, that's where another dramatic tier break is. Like you have Jared Goff going off the board at the 601 in this draft. And I'm not going to be holding back on a trade to go out there and get someone like Joe Burrow if it means I'm having to give up Jared Goff. But I think that's all I got for this video. Let me know if y'all enjoyed this. Really just thought it would be an interesting thing to go out there and talk about. And of course, if you have not done so already, drop a like on it. Get into a draft with me on Underdog. Link in the description, link in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% a positive match. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. I really hope you have a great day and I really hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.